addictive process, right? The behavioral, learnt, addictive process. That part of ourselves needs to be cut off. That part of ourselves needs to be starved and put to death, right? And then the other side of it is the compulsive parts of ourselves that are wounded and hurt and have so much trauma or whatever it might be. Those are the parts of ourselves that we need to kindly and gently approach and have the healing presence of Jesus and his community come around us and be transformed, renewed, reformed, all those things. Welcome to the 423 podcast with 423 Communities, where we explore the intersection of faith, recovery, and restoration, equipping you to move from shame and addiction towards life in Christ. Welcome back, you guys. It's so good to be with y'all. I'm Ben, your host, and this is
Joel
Warnicking.
Co-host?
Yeah, fellow host.
Is that my title? Okay.
I think so.
Like guest host?
We'll promote you to that.
Okay.
Yeah. Continual guest.
Associate host?
Yeah.
Whatever you want to call me.
Right. Joel, do you like gardening?
I think I will when I'm old.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that going to be your future habit?
I would like to
pastime?
think that when I'm older, I'll be like this carefully manicured older gentleman.
Yeah.
Maybe wear like a nice sweater, but like have a very manicured yard.
Yeah. Be this
because
wise
that's like
sage.
Not what I have today.
Mm-hmm.
I have like I gotta go blast out mowing and then just cut everything and blow everything away.
Yeah.
And then go back to regular life.
Just get it done.
It's just got to get done.
Yeah. It's not an enjoyable pastime where you're tending to the garden and you're growing this plant, growing that plant, and like.
I think I would like that though someday.
Yeah, me too.
Like to see something that you have carefully curated and brought to life, like maybe producing your own fruits and vegetables, and like actually getting to taste the fruits of labor would be truly a dream.
It would be. I hope for that as well one day for myself.
Currently.
Yeah, I have like a front yard and I rent. And it's a duplex, and so landlord mows it for us.
Hey.
Don't even have a backyard. Hey, I'm not complaining. It's nice.
That's the way to go.
But we just got some flowers, and we've been tending to them through the summer heat.
Wow.
And they're still alive.
Good for you.
Just pour some
ready
water
to have
on
a baby.
them. Yeah. Wait, what?
That's the test.
Oh, if we can take care of flowers.
We never could take care of flowers, and we have 3 kids, and they're all still alive.
So far, so good. Yeah.
Yeah. So we dispelled the test.
Proved that one wrong.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah. Good job. Anyway. Well, I asked you about gardening because of John 15.
Ooh.
Abiding in the vine.
That's a great Jesus juke.
Thank you, man. That's what we're all about here. Jesus jukes. That's the only way I know how to bring up the conversation.
Illustration.
Yeah.
It's a good illustration.
But where are we going with that today, Joel? What are we diving into?
Yeah, I think I've loved this first run of this podcast. Just going through, hopefully just step by step, what it means for us to be running this race of recovery. And we've hit some great topics. If you haven't listened to those, go back, take a listen, some pretty great stuff.
Yeah.
Today, and I think this is a really important step for people in recovery, but we're really going to be focusing on the practices and the structure of the recovery journey. And so far, we've hit on a lot of ideology and philosophy and community and the heart of God and others and how to put some of these things in place as you're running this race set before you. And those are fantastic and they need to be there. But there is this part of the recovery process that needs structure, needs discipline, and it needs to have a system that is built that can support what it is that we're trying to do, which is find health from our problematic sexual behaviors and disorders that are present in our system.
Most definitely. Yeah. No, I love that. And I think in the other episodes we've laid a good foundation and hopefully given a long-term vision of where we're running to on this race, right? And start with the foundation of our identity in Christ. We need the foundation of being in a loving, supportive, witnessing community, having fellow members of the body of Christ around us and supporting us on this journey. But at the end of the day, you're never going to change unless you take that step for yourself and you truly and fully commit to doing everything necessary to uproot this addictive pattern from your life, because an addiction doesn't just go away because you want it to. Yeah.
When I coach guys or talk about just the basics, just the foundational pieces of recovery, especially to someone who has no idea, like an intake call, and they're like, I'm just getting started.
Yeah.
I typically explain it that there's two main components to what we would call a sexual addiction or problematic sexual behaviors.
Right.
The first is probably more well-known, which is over here you have this incredibly addictive process and substance, and how pornography in the process of using this addictive force hijacks the brain and the nervous system, and it rewires literally our brain's pathways to pursue this form of pleasure and replacement of other things. And it desensitizes us, and there's this addictive process, right? And this is powerful. It's one of the most powerful addictive processes and forms that we have as a human race. And we see that because it infiltrates nearly every system and function of community at every level. It's affecting people. And so there's this powerful addictive force. This is built on habits, patterns, physical structures. Neuroscience is all wrapped up in this component. The other side of this foundational piece of what makes the addictive process so powerful is this compulsion away from pain. And there's probably a better way to say that. But inside of this component are all of these internalized narratives of shame and pain and family of origin issues and broken attachments with parent figures and internal woundings that you may have suffered at such a young age before you were even cognizant that you were being developed by these forces. And these are these core emotional wounds and triggers that have shaped how we perceive ourselves, how we perceive God, and how we perceive others, right? And this is the complexity of what makes a human soul unique, right? These are these complex issues inside of the system. Both of these need to be focused on in recovery, but they have immensely different ways about which we go to help those spaces heal.
Right.
And how you work to identify them, how you work to help them heal, and how you work to help them process requires structure, requires an understanding of the systems inside of yourself.
Yeah.
Right?
No, most definitely. I think that's a really helpful image for people to start to delineate within their own journeys. And I love the way that you've talked about in the past is that the addictive process, right? The behavioral, learned addictive process, that part of ourselves needs to be cut off. That part of ourselves needs to be starved and put to death, right? And then the other side of it is the compulsive parts of ourselves that are wounded and hurt and have so much trauma or whatever it might be. Those are the parts of ourselves that we need to kindly and gently approach and have the healing presence of Jesus and his community come around us and be transformed, renewed, reformed, all those things into what we are meant to be, right? Into what Jesus originally intended for us. And so, to come back to gardening, I would love to hear you introduce kind of the structure or the format that could be helpful for our listeners.
Yeah, I think you said that so well. Like this side, the addiction side, needs to be cut out. It needs to be removed. And, going to gardening language, of which I am not proficient as a gardener, right. But I know enough that things need to be pruned. Things need to be removed. Weeds need to be removed. There's parable of the sower, right, who threw the seeds among the weeds. The weeds come up and just destroy. And so there's a portion of this addictive process over here that the first layer of that is removal. The first layer of that is that this needs to die, a violent death inside of your life. Yeah. And so many guys are so hesitant to take some of these steps, to take that, to jump over that gap between understanding that, hey, when they first get awareness of like, hey, I think I might have a problem. I think I might have an issue with unhealthy sexual behavior or problematic sexual behavior. It is coming up in my life. There's awareness, right? And they're like, oh, okay. They begin to see how these different pieces of the addictive process are destroying their relationships, destroying how they see God, destroying how they see themselves. Right. And they're aware of it. And then they begin to move towards, wow, I really think I need to start changing. And they begin to value the understanding that, hey, this addiction needs to be put away. It needs to stop. And they value it, and they begin to approach a group like ours, and they learn so many things like relapse prevention tools and habitual awareness. We'll talk some about these resources here in a second. And they begin to have this awareness that this thing needs to go away. This thing needs to go away. And yet they may spend years saying, wow, I really think it's valuable that I put this addiction to death. I really think it would be a great thing if I stopped looking at porn. Man, I keep stumbling across different dating apps or social media apps that just pull me down every week. It would be a really good idea if I stopped using those. And they stay in this valuing. And I think there's a framework that's called the behavioral gap. There's a great picture of these steps of change. And change happens when you can cross the chasm between just valuing an idea and then beginning to implement it as a foundational piece of your now new life. Mm-hmm. And once you will not move forward towards change until you learn to take that intentional step towards putting this thing to death and making that first step. So the first thing is that there are some things that are going to need to be pruned. Right. That are going to need to be deconstructed, dismantled. Mm-hmm. And that might mean, at least what I see my dad do pretty much every year in the garden, is scrape the whole thing clean and start over with fresh new soil and a new place to build, and building all these structures to help that process of change take place.
Yeah, I love that imagery that you give. And I think the behavioral gap is such a useful tool for helping people, including myself, take that extra step to really commit and see that change come to fruition. And the model that we have for change is kind of based on John 15, where Jesus is talking about himself as the vine, and we, his followers, are the branches. And our Father is the vine dresser, someone that comes along and prunes away the dead or overgrown parts to promote more growth, for fruit to be bared upon the vine. And so I think it's important for us in our relationship with Jesus as Christ followers to first see the trellis that we've built around this plant, around this vine that is growing, right? Our connection to Jesus, our ability to abide in or remain in our relationship with Christ. And so it's easy to think about this image of a trellis, right? An interlaying woven wooden structure, right, that promotes growth for a vine, of saying like, all right, I'm starting the recovery journey. Now it's time to build a trellis in order to support this recovery lifestyle, this Jesus-centered recovery lifestyle. But in reality, we actually already have a trellis built. We already have a set of practices and structures and ways that we've been formed. Yeah. And so I think it's important, right, how we keep saying we need to put this part to death. We need to lay off the old self or the old humanity in order to put on the new humanity. Yeah. And so what are some good ways, or maybe what are some common pitfalls, ways of life that people may find themselves in whenever it comes to the old trellis that they have?
Yeah, definitely. I think that's such powerful language to recognize that we are being discipled and we have been disciplined and discipled into something. Yeah. It's not that you are undiscipled. Like you have a set way of life. Mm-hmm. Like if you're actually to pull back and look at your life cleanly, let's say in 15-minute blocks, right? Yeah. You'd be like, wow, I do pretty much the same thing every day or every week. There's a cycle. We're created as beings of pattern, as beings of process. Totally. And so you are rooted and discipled into something. And recognizing that the current way that you have been discipled has led you towards rampant addiction in your life. Right. And so first is getting awareness, and so that's even behavioral gap, right? Getting awareness of what it is that you have built around you that has caused you to be where you are. Mm-hmm. And some of those is just understanding some of just the practical things of life, of how you spend your time, where your attention is going. Mm-hmm. Even apps like the screen time, like where am I being discipled? What have I been worshiping this week through my attention? Having that awareness of where your attention is going and what it is being discipled in is a huge piece of understanding what to cut out.
Yeah, it's super telling. And not only for, the obvious of like, oh, I keep interacting with tempting material, arousing material, something that's going to bring me down back to relapse, to go to that behavior I don't want to go to. But I think it also is really telling, like you said, if you actually deeply and thoroughly evaluate your life and the structure that you've built or maybe just fallen into, it will tell you a lot about the roots as well, the past that has gotten you to where you're at today. If you're someone that finds yourself straying away from, having deep social interaction, you find yourself wanting to go towards distraction and numbing through social media or other forms of media, or, pick your distraction in today's modern age. Or maybe you find yourself on the other side, someone always in a hurry, in a rush, trying to go from the thing to thing to thing, always filling your calendar, always looking to have something going on, right? That's going to tell you a lot about where you came from. Maybe you have an avoidant attachment style, as I was describing at first, or you have an anxious one, looking and trying to make sure you're secure, or you always have something going on. And so just little things like that can actually reveal or tip you off, or be symptoms of a deeper diagnosis under the surface.
Yeah, and I think that honestly goes back to kind of what we talked about earlier of there's these two different components, right, that make up this addictive process, and how this side, which is those attachment styles, and this is those I feel lonely or lost or hopeless or despair or abandonment or any of these like big emotions that drive us. When I feel those things, I need something to medicate that space.
Right.
And so both of those need to be worked on at the same time. And that's why we focus so much at 423 within our communities about healing those places in our story and understanding how my attachment has been formed, how my response to the world has been formed.
Yeah.
This trellis of the emotional structure of my soul has been formed by all these different components and layers of complexity, and how this is what these behavioral answers are trying to answer those questions in my soul.
Right.
Am I worthy? Am I loved? Am I sought after? Am I seen? Is there hope for me in this area of my life? When that doesn't have an immediate answer, when the answer is, you are unlovable, you are unworthy, you are not seen, we have to soothe that internal pain somehow.
Right.
And so we use these medicating forces, and sometimes we think of these medicating forces as like drugs or like the big pornography addiction, but a lot of times this begins with some of these simple, very, very, very physical actions that we do inside of life. And so, man, I'd love for the sake of our listeners, for the sake of our community, just to also give like a practical kind of coaching session on some of these, because a lot of times podcasts or people talking, you can just, because we love it, we focus so much on the philosophical or the theoretical. It's like, great, abiding, trellises, lattice structures. What are you talking about? And so I'd love to dive into just a little bit of some of those just practices to pursue what it means to be healthy in that space. And so, Ben, for you work with youth, college, parents, kind of, I don't know if you can tell, but he's much younger than me by a half a generation, just probably. A little bit. What are some of the things that you have seen of those unhealthy building blocks in this like behavioral side of things?
Yeah, I think with the teens, I see a deep need for parents to step up and create those external limiters, which can be a huge gift to the teen, right? Because they don't have a fully developed prefrontal cortex. They don't have all the decision-making capacities. They're going through puberty. There's all of these different things happening within inside them that give them a disadvantage at overcoming these unwanted sexual behaviors that take such deep root. And so for likely the adult man listening to this podcast, you most likely don't have your parents monitoring your phone for you anymore.
But we all were teens in college age.
Yes, and some of us are stuck in some of those patterns, inclling myself in some areas of life.
Which still looks like a baby. So
you're 12 years old, man.
Yeah,
and that's a good thing. That'll age well for you. Already has. But anyway, all that to say, we kind of need to take a step back, I think, with our phones, with our technology, and learn to parent it for ourselves. So if you have a habit of scrolling on your phone for an hour before bed, maybe to drown out some of those shame messages that start to creep in at night, or the anxiety of tomorrow starts to come in, there's some healthy practices to address that anxiety and those shame messages. But first, you need to get rid of the distractor, the limiter, the thing that keeps taking you down the forms of maladaptive coping.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is one huge way, learning to parent the technology for yourself.
Yeah.
And oftentimes, on a good day, you could find yourself saying, man, I'm never going to go on these bad websites. I'm never going to fall down that rabbit hole. But more than likely, you need some brothers alongside you. You need a community around you for whenever you get tired, for whenever you don't have the will to fight anymore, to come alongside you, encourage you, and just be with you in that struggle. So I would say that's one of the first and foremost things you have to do, and you have to be willing to take that step. It's a sacrifice.
Yeah, I think working with men for years now, I think one of the things that I see that it's almost the hardest thing for people to give up is maybe less of like the pornography.
Yeah.
Sometimes, but it's more of my access to just the abundance of apps and the productivity, and I can't have a locked up phone.
Right.
Covenantize messes with my software for this work piece, and I have to be productive, and they're kind of addicted to having full access to life, and it hinders their ability to grow.
Yeah.
Because they want to have full unhindered access to all of these things in their life to help them be what they want to be in life.
Yeah.
Or other places this looks like is video games. This is a huge piece. I'm not calling anyone out specifically if I know your story, but it is so common in this day and age with video games and computer games to be this place of escape and to be this place of replacement of healthy behaviors. And if you're spending hours and hours on your phone, just even then that hyperactivity of engaging your device, watching too much Netflix, engaging in endless computer games, it is completely taking over your brain's ability to regulate.
Yeah.
It just completely drives your system down to the point of the only next answer to help your system kind of resolve that frenetic activity is to use pornography as a sense of calming that system down. And so getting guys to understand that system of, hey, there are these pieces in your life that you think are good. Like, I love being overactive on my phone, and AI has made it so much more fun to produce music and all the integrations into work, and it just feels like this open, endless void of hyperactivity. But yet that is the thing that is opening the door to this addictive pattern in your life.
Yeah.
And so getting them to realize the power of the external limiter. You are not policing yourself. You are not, and I say that in a bad way. A lot of guys are like, I don't want to be like policed. I don't want to be parented by anything. Like, I have the ability and the willpower to say no. And I say, no, you don't. That's why you're stuck in addiction.
You're human.
Is that you don't have the ability to say, no, I will not run across the street and run into the road. Right? There's that classic example of talking about external limiters. Maybe it's just classic to me because I'm old. But it's like if you had a front yard, you lived in a house, you have a front yard, you have kids that play in that front yard every day. And 100 yards away is a highway. No fence, no guardrail, just nice green grass to racing cars. If that's how you lived your life with no barriers to that deadly force right in front of you, how likely is it that child, 6-year-old child, I have kids, that ball that they're kicking is going to roll towards that grass and they're going to run and they're going to get hit by a car? Or those of you who have dogs, which I don't know why. Love animals, can't have them. Poor Winston. Sorry.
That's my mom. You're probably listening to this. We love Winston. I love Winston,
but his allergies got me bad.
Your allergies,
my allergies to Winston got me bad.
Anyway,
if you have a dog in that front yard, and he's gonna get hit by a car, right? Because he is unaware and he's driven by the impulse to play and be in part of that system, and so you would put up a fence, right in front of that place, so that when that ball rolls that direction, when your impulses and compulsions are telling you to go in that direction, that there is something that stops you before you get run over by a car. Right? You have to have a fence in that yard. Every parent's like, yes, you have to have a fence in that yard. And so we do have to parent ourselves. We do have to put that external limiter in place to keep us from getting run over by our addictive process.
Most definitely.
And yes, there are times when you will run to that fence, you will climb the fence, and you will run and get hit by a car. But at least there is the 30 seconds to few minutes of thought of, is it worth it to climb over this fence to get hit by that car?
Yeah.
It brings that prefrontal cortex online, and it
Mm-hmm.
helps you make the rational decision to say no to the process set before you.
Right.
So there needs to be limiters in place.
Yeah.
And there's a few practices and tools that we have and that we utilize that help us become aware of, like, okay, well, how do I know where to put those boundaries in place? And so do you mind talking about some of those that we have?
Yeah, for sure. And that's great conventional wisdom, right? To put a fence up in order to not damage yourself or those you love.
Yeah.
Very conventional wisdom. I love the way you put that. But as for some helpful practices that we encourage in our communities, both with the teens and the men, is doing two tools. One would be a habit audit that you kind of referenced earlier, and then the second would be the recovery trellis. And so that's something that we've been referencing this whole time, but it's basically taking an inventory of all your practices, all the things that lead you to do the things you do not want to do, and walking through it slowly but surely of assessing, man, what is the practice? What is the thing? What does it make me feel? What's going on in my head? What's going on in my heart? What are the emotions that I'm having? What's the thoughts that are running through my head when I do this? Where is it happening? What time of day? What are the circumstances around you? So circumstances within you and circumstances around you. And then it's saying, what is a boundary that I can put up to protect myself from running to this? You know, the boundaries, like we mentioned, and we'll say time and time again, that is not the fix in and of itself, but it will help you. It'll be that fence. And then lastly, what is a healthy practice that you can replace this with? So you do that and you just go row by row answering those questions for each practice that is unhealthy or leads you to that unwanted sexual behavior. And then by the end of it, you'll have built a trellis, or you'll expose the trellis you've already built.
And one of the best ways to find out where to put a boundary is when you get run over by a car. Right?
Yeah.
And so there is a power of becoming aware, and, you know, when you do have a slip, of pausing and saying, or even right before, of like, I jumped a fence and I'm getting run over by a car. Why did this happen?
Yeah.
You may still get run over by the car, but you at least took some time to say, oh, I need to build a taller fence there, or I need to completely block out that wall,
Right.
completely build a whole new structure to keep me isolated. There's a reason why there are like isolation rooms. Like, you just get locked in a vest and thrown in a room, right? Sometimes that needs to happen.
Yeah. Straight jacket.
For the first year and a half plus of my recovery journey, I had a complete dumb phone.
Yep.
Had zero access through my computer, through Covenant eyes of just helping me stay accountable. These were all healthy boundaries for me.
Right.
For me, I even had some pretty severe consequences because of my background, my history with this, that really helped reinforce this thought process of, if I jump over this fence, if I get hit by that car, it has way much more impact and damage in my life. Those awareness pieces, those external limiters, those fences, and those consequences were healthy for me to have.
Yeah.
And it really brought about a more rapid onset of health and sobriety. And I think you mentioned something that is also very important, that it is that recovery trellis identifies, one, just the tangible things in this addictive process that need to get cut out and reshaped and reformed. And the habit audit is a 15-minute block of, like, what did I do every 15 minutes for 24, 48 hours, whatever you need to do to get a clear picture of what is forming you. And that's great for, every day from 7 p.m. to 2 a.m., I'm on a device of some kind. Wow, that is a powerful forming force.
Yeah.
Or every time I get out of a meeting that's difficult, I jump on social media and scroll for 30 to 40 minutes. Wow, that's shaping me, right?
Yeah.
Those habit audits help you identify those pieces that are forming you every single day.
No, exactly.
But you also mentioned those pieces of those core emotional triggers, those wounds, those feelings of isolation and brokenness that are leading you towards those unhealthy behaviors.
Yeah.
And those pieces are just as important of identifying, becoming aware of.
Yeah.
So, you know, we do have some practices within 423 just in terms of our community lens, that help us become aware of those pieces. How have you seen that community focus really empower your ability to identify where a boundary needs to get put in place and to identify those areas of our emotional self that need to get healed?
Yeah, no, I'll get to that with the community, but I love that you bring up your own story in this and talk about the sacrifices that you had to make, especially at the beginning of getting a dumb phone, getting rid of the convenience of having an iPhone and free access on the internet for your work or just for life in general. But in reality, those sacrifices that you made at the start were really investments into your future. And they obviously paid dividends on end for your life, right?
Yeah.
And I would challenge whoever's weighing the cost of either cutting out those unhealthy things or keeping the comfort of having them. In reality, it's not going to be a good investment in your future or the person that you're becoming.
Yeah.
And then as for the community practices, y'all will have to wait until next week because we're actually going to do a part 2 for this podcast. And we're going to go over all of the healthy activities that go into reconstructing this trellis.
Yeah.
So this week we talked about the unhealthy practices, the trellis we've already built in our life that has gotten us to where we're at today in addiction. And next week we'll cover the healthy, life-giving practices.
That's right. Okay.
Yeah.
We'll see you then.
Thanks for listening. If you want to learn more about 423 Communities or get connected with us, go to 423communities.org and follow us at the links in the show notes or the description below.